Hey everyone, I would first like to thank you all for your support. Thank you for all the loving words, the kindness, the prayers, and of course, just the fact that you guys offer your help in any way that you can help. That I'm allowed to turn to you for support. That alone soothes me and makes me feel a whole lot better in this difficult time. So thank you so much for that. And I also would like to thank David Wood and his team for their incredible support. I mean, just the fact that he shared my video on his pages. And also, just that you're all here, that you're here with me, that we're doing this together. That means so much more to me than you can imagine. So thank you. Keep posting comments, keep posting, tips on what you want me to talk about, and I'll see what I can do. And hopefully I'll get better at this. So, today I want to go straight into the question that, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, there. Marcus asked, what made you realize that Islam is a lie? Marcus, a lot of things made me realize that Islam was a lie. And it was a process of a lifetime. First, you have to understand the very nature of my abuse. It wasn't physical. Nobody beat me. But it was mental and it was emotional abuse. It was from an early age in my life that I was being taught that I am not my own person. I don't have the freedom of doing what I want. Everything has a social consequence, that you always have to take into account your reputation and how your family feels and thinks about certain decisions, and that you're not to question your faith, you're not to question your principles, your traditions, but you are to, you're loyal or you're not. There's black or there's white. And that, you were always shamed into doing things. You were shamed, you were guilt-tripped, you were, pretty much scared into a certain belief system. Every time you wanted to deviate from what you thought was the truth, every time you just started to question a certain value, there would be so much people who went against it. There would be huge interventions, you can't believe this, and it started, all of this started early. And for me, my family, they had this controlling thing. They wanted to control me and control the outcome of my life and make sure that I do that which is right for me according to what they think is right for me. And this sort of, when you explain it that way to people from Middle East, they usually tend to think that this is a cultural thing. Oh, it's just, culture. But that's the problem, is that abuse has become a culture. Abuse has become a religion, faith system. People base their whole entire beings on abuse. And I have many reasons as to why I can see how Islam and honor culture, they walk hand in hand, because they're both abusive. They're about control. They're about taking away your freedom and kind of pushing down the woman so that she's less worth than the man. She has less rights. One woman or one man is like equivalent to two women, things like that. And that you are, from an early age, you're taught to remove all of your desires that are natural as a woman, your desire to be a woman and embrace what it means to be a woman. You're taught early on not to have that, and that, there's something shameful and dirty about being a woman. That the more you are like a man, the more masculine you are, the more you kind of submit in a bad way to the man. The more God will reward you. The more you cover up your beauty, the uglier you look superficially, the less you care about your appearance, the better. And There are so many of these values that you are taught from an early age, and you're brainwashed into these things. Imagine, this is not one person. This is a family. This is a community that keeps telling you this over and over again. So what happens is you are brought up as a person who is not in control of his or her own life. And you become like this bird in a cage. I call it the bird in a cage syndrome. It's basically that your whole entire mentality, it's dependent on what other people think and feel about you and what you do. If you were to question and someday just see that you're in that cage and you would try to flee from it, you are in for so much difficulty. And you will have to have your family leave you and mistreat you. And once you've left this cage, you won't be able to fly. You won't know how to coordinate yourself in society. You won't know your rights, your laws. You won't know how the government or other people can help you in your situation. You don't know that you are in the very midst of an honor culture. You don't know that Islam is based on abuse. You don't know these things. So you are kind of, you're left in the dark to a lot of these things that are obvious to everybody else. And the word honor is never even mentioned, the bad honor kind of thing. It's never mentioned. And basically that is sort of the background story as to why I started realizing that Islam was a lie. Because first I realized my life, the way I saw the world, the way I saw myself, it was a lie. Because I looked at myself in the mirror and I couldn't see a person. I saw a family. I saw a community. I didn't see this. I didn't see the individual per se. I didn't see what I believed in, what I wanted from life, who I was. And when this happened, in the midst of all this, I call it it was the very high point of the abuse. When the emotional and psychological abuse had reached this high point, this happened to me. And it happened, during this time when I was also praying a lot to God for clarity and for truth. That's when these things started happening. So it began with a prayer. It began with just being oppressed, coming from an abusive background that I wasn't aware of was abuse. That sort of triggered the wheels to start spinning, that something is not right here and I need to figure out what. And then I met this guy that I'm still with today. I thank God for that. I met him and he further spinned these wheels by questioning me when I wanted to make a decision, or when I said something or believed something. He would say, is this really your thought? Is this what you believe in? What is this based upon? It was always these counter, questions that would appear, and I would be totally taken by them. Like, what is all this? And I would be offended, and I would go into some rant and, bash him for, you're an awful person, for telling me the obvious truth. You're terrible, terrible individual. And then slowly I became less and less sensitive. The more he offended me in a good way, the less sensitive I became to the truth. And I started seeing, he paid attention to the abuse that was going on, and he started pointing them out. And I would defend them. I would defend the faith, the family, everything. I would be like, you are so wrong about this. But then the more I thought about it, I started seeing, this is something I have always known and fought, but I never had the courage to do it out of the fear of what other people were going to do and say and think, and also how they were going to treat me. I was afraid I wouldn't be loved if I started questioning these things, of course, because that's you get your love and acceptance through these conditions. If you no longer live up to the conditions, you don't get the acceptance or the love, and you're disowned from your family. So basically, things happened in my life that were weird. I realized they were weird. The older I got, the more I wanted to make my own decisions. I started seeing how something wasn't right. I started praying to God for clarity, for truth. God, give me your wisdom, give me your knowledge. Show me what it is that I need to know. Give me that extra puzzle piece that's missing. And it came. It came in the form of a person who I got engaged with, romantically, and this person helped further spin these wheels with these questions about the self and about, how they were treating me. And then I started realizing and seeing that I am being guilted, guilt-tripped, shamed, and scared into everything that I think and feel and do. And that is the root of Islam. That is the very root of it. And so I started understanding that things that were happening, it wasn't just culture, No, it was actually based on the very foundation, the very values of Islam. If you look in the Quran, if you look in the Hadiths, there's plenty of sources, plenty of texts that show you the things that I told you about now. And I can show them later on in other videos. But that is the very foundation of Islam. And I started seeing this, and I thought, all of this is just too strange. But again, as most Muslims are, you can have the truth staring you right in the face, and you won't believe it, you won't accept it. So further, I needed more. I needed to be more offended. I needed more truth, something that would hit me hard. And thankfully, I thank God for that today, it came. And those things I want to say here in this video, I'm going to mention some of them, what they were. Yes, okay, so what I just described for you guys, the background story, what this eventually led up to was a total confusion in my faith. I didn't know how to be a Muslim. I stopped calling myself a Muslim, actually. People would ask me what I was. I said, I can't tell you, or I'm something different, because the way I was practicing Islam was not according to the way Islam teaches you to practice it. I would totally disregard the hadiths. I would proclaim them as, false. I would say these are not the true words of the Prophet Muhammad, so I am not going to believe them. And doing so, you are kind of stuck, because you start realizing that you cannot do it alone with the Quran, even though the Quran says that you can. You start seeing that there are many details to the way you practice the faith that is mentioned in the hadiths that is not mentioned in the Quran. So you start seeing that there is just not enough. There's not enough, proper guidance here. Everything is inconsistent. You have some verses that, kind of, they tell you to do a certain prayer, but they don't tell you how. And then if you look earlier on in the book, you see that it says to follow the Prophet as your model for how to practice your faith. And so you kind of, you're left in a very awkward position. That's what I'm trying to say here. So I got to a point, sometime before I met this guy, I got to a point where I started calling myself a Quranist. I said, I'm no longer a Muslim, I'm a Quranist. And Muslims would say, you can't call yourself Quranist. I mean, you're either a Muslim or you're not. And I said, no, look, hold up. I was like, being a Muslim, a true Muslim, is not the same thing as the Islam that you know of. And they would be like, what are you talking about? We know the real Islam. It's the hadiths, it's the Quran. What are you talking about? And I said, look, and I also said this to my boyfriend at the time, that there are two different Islams. There is false Islam, and then there's true Islam. True Islam totally disregards the hadiths. False Islam regards the hadiths as part of the scriptures. If you are to be a true Muslim, you have to recognize the hadiths as false, and you have to totally base your whole religion on the Quran. And this is really funny, because you cannot do so if you don't have the details of the hadith. And And I would start preaching about this new Islam, the Quranism thing. And it was totally different. They prayed differently. They had another number of prayers per day. The requirements were less. Things seemed very liberal. You were pretty much allowed to do whatever you wanted, however it suited you and however you interpreted the text. Because guess what? It wasn't detailed enough. And so I started thinking that I was this new revolutionary Muslim called a Quranist, and that being so would mean I would be more peaceful, I would be a better Muslim, I would be a more adaptable Muslim, like, how do you say it? Like, I would be more suitable it would fit today's society a whole lot better. That's how I thought, if I were to be this kind of Muslim. And it was modern. It didn't have all that violence stuff. That's what I thought, at least. It's inspirational, it's peaceful, and it teaches you to be strong and strive. So, I don't know how to explain this other than that my entire view of Islam, when I started noticing that it had so many mistakes, instead of questioning Islam, I started spinning it around a little bit, creating my own spin and making my own Islam. And I would think that Quranism was the true thing. But if you're a true Muslim, you would understand that the Quranism is an incomplete Islam, and it doesn't make any sense, really. So I started preaching that the Quranism was a collective of the three monotheistic religions. I thought of the way I read the Quran, the way I interpreted was that, you know what? The Quran is pretty much, it's a book that kind of wants to unite all these other books. And it totally removes the whole notion that there's Judaism, there's Christianity. It removes this. And it wants to unify all the Abrahamic religions and call them, all of them, as one religion under God, under Abraham being the man you look up to. And that we are to view Islam as sort of a collective, like a summary of all these religions. So that's how I saw it. That was my thought. And I mean, by all means, it makes perfect sense if you look in the Quran and you see that in the very beginning that's how it's being taught. The very first chapters, that is the message. The message is that people who say that there's Christianity and that it's not like Islam and stuff like that, you're not to pay attention to those things. Man, there's so many things. I get a headache just thinking about this. But what happened was, I'm really trying to keep this video short, it's impossible. What happened was that this guy that I met, he poked a hole in this theory. He said, your Quranism theory is total bull. You can't hold on to this because it has so many mistakes. And I said, how? How? You have this book. It says good things about all these monotheistic religions. It unifies all of them. It says it's the one book for all of them, that we are to believe in this if we truly are Christians and Jews. And that somehow it's updated and it's the better version of them. That the other ones have been kind of altered over time. And that, that Islam speaks well of Jesus and all the other people mentioned in the Bible. It speaks really well of them. It's just that, we are not to believe that he was crucified. This makes no sense now when I think about it, because the very idea, foundation of Christianity is that Jesus was crucified and that this saved us. And, it's sort of centered around that event. and a lot of things in the Old Testament leads up to that. So it's funny how they totally want to disregard this. If you do that, you're saying pretty much the entirety of Christianity is just bullocks. It's made up. And at the same time, as a Muslim, you are taught that you are to trust the scriptures of the Bible, that they are also part of God's book. Do you see how it's contradicting itself in so many ways? So all these ideas kind of together made me start questioning Islam. And also having that partner who would constantly be on to me and be like, look, I can poke a hole in your theory. And I would be very defensive, and I would be totally against it and offended, because he would call Islam a religion of, Satan, or, this is satanic. It's devil worship, and it's not the same God of that of Christianity. It's not the same. Hearing those two things really angered me, because I thought, I am the most peaceful person there is. I wouldn't even hurt a fly. And you're sitting here telling me that it's a religion of Satan. And I'm praying to the same God you're praying to. And you're saying they're two different. And I would have to say that was the beginning. That's the beginning of how I discovered that Islam was a lie. Was that when I made these claims, he would answer me with that they're not the same God, and there's true evidence for that if you look at how the God is represented in the Bible and how he's represented in the Quran and what he says in these different scriptures. And that you may be peaceful as a person, you may be peaceful. And that is always the case with Muslims, that majority are peaceful. They're peaceful beings in society, they do their thing and all that. But that doesn't mean your faith is peaceful. You are not your faith. Your ideology, there can be huge problems with it, but as a human, you can twist your ideology and turn it into something peaceful. But we are to understand the lies of Islam. That is the whole point here. Because if your faith is a lie, you cannot base your life on it. No matter how peaceful you are, no matter how well it suits you, if it's a lie, you have to leave it. It's as simple as that. So, in addition to this, I'm going to give a few other things that made me feel that Islam was a lie. That basically, I'm just looking through this list. I already explained the abuse. It was just understanding that the nature of Muslims it was grounded in Islam, like I already mentioned to you. The bad nature of them was grounded in Islam, that it was actually Islamic values, that Muslims were more prone to sitting, gossiping, bashing other religions, judging other religions. They were more prone to do this and proclaiming themselves as true followers of God and all that, this whole arrogance about them, that you couldn't have a normal conversation with a Muslim without having to participate in some bashing and judging. They didn't understand the concept of unconditional love. They didn't have that, and they denied it. In Islam, you deny that kind of love. And also just all the inconsistencies, the confusion at home, what I had been through, how I had been brought up. Also that I had been visited in my whole life by demonic entities. I will talk about those in another video. It's a very, very big part of this. That also, realizing that they were of evil nature and that they weren't angels like Muslims would tell me that they were, was also part of this. That every time I felt confusion in my faith, I was being shamed back into believing in it. And that my the hauntings, the demonic hauntings and such, got worse when I felt that I distanced myself from my faith. And then they got less. The hauntings became less when I went back to my faith. Very, very strange coincidence, in my opinion. And understanding that if, you know, that if you cannot have a relationship with your God in prayer, prayer is pointless. I'd always struggled with it when I wanted to pray to God. I didn't feel a relationship with Him. I couldn't connect with Him. That instead I was trying to force some kind of like euphoric feeling through my own emotions, through shame, through guilt, and things like that. I would try to force a feeling in prayer, but I never felt connected to God in the prayer. Because A, it was incredibly ritualistic, B, I didn't understand what I was saying. And C, there were rules on how you could talk to God. You couldn't talk to Him the way I'm talking to you right now. That wouldn't be acceptable. It would be shameful. And the whole Quranism notion, I already mentioned that. And also just that how my belief system so easily was annihilated pretty much by historical evidence, archaeological evidence, knowledge about the different theologies, how that alone could poke holes in my theories, in my belief system. That made a big difference. Just looking at the time frames, looking at when certain things were introduced, when the prophet had his revelation, and looking at that in relation to when things happened for Christians, that made a very, very big difference. Because then I realized, for instance, that it's very difficult to fake and alter the Christian teachings in such a short time between when the last teachings were preached and when Islam was introduced, considering that there were so many different ways that these teachings were recorded, and by so many different people and so many different there were witnesses. And the fact that I would believe in this prophet who just spoke to people, that he just basically wanted people to believe him simply from having had revelations from an angel that they hadn't seen, and just telling them that he could see this other world and how evil things were. He could look into hell, and that frightened him so much, and that he warned his people, like things like that. But they never really saw what he had seen. They couldn't really see any miracles. It was all talk. And if this had happened in today's society, probably this person would have been proclaimed as, someone mental. They would have said, you know what, you're schizophrenic. You're making this up. That's what they would have said in today's society. Yet they believe in this, that this actually happened. I cannot believe that I believe this. Also, a lot of YouTube videos that help me understand the lie. There are many Muslims ex-Muslims, people who left Islam for Christianity, that can give us a good insight into what it was that made them leave. That is the most helpful thing, in my opinion. If you are a Muslim, because you need someone who has been where you've been, who've been brainwashed, to kind of remove this mentality from you. So that was really useful for me. But also, of course, the person who criticizes your faith, that they're not afraid of being controversial. Tell them what you think. If you think it's devil worship, you tell them that. And you tell them why. And it's very important, because most Muslims do not know this very detail, that the way that God is, the picture painted of God in the Bible is not the same. It's actually very opposite of the way that God is painted in Islam. That's a very, very big, important detail that Muslims do not know of, because most of them don't know true Christianity, what it is. They just rely on hearsay. And just how true, biblical Christianity is pretty much against the things that Islam teaches. That it's just against that Islam even exists. That's something that you have to hear to see the lie of Islam. Just looking at the Quran objectively, knowing all these things that I just mentioned to you, and not turning the verses about hatred and violence into something that was some telltale from some battle at some point, but see it for what it is. It's actually commandments written in the law book about ways that you are to treat non-believers with violence, with abuse, not because of a circumstance, but because of their values, because they believe differently. And so that means that in today's society, the circumstance hasn't changed. You are to still behave that way. And it's not mentioned that it's supposed to be some kind of self-defense, but it's a commandment. That's how you're supposed to treat them. That made a huge difference. Just the entirety of the Quran, that it's so inconsistent. At some points you have peaceful verses, at some point you have violent verses about the same situation. The more you read it, the more crazy it gets. The last parts of the book is just totally chaotic and just evil, pure evil. I don't even understand it. It makes no sense, and it just scares you. So all in all, the Quran scares the crap out of you. That's the way it is. And that alone is a sign something is not right here. So just the nature of it, that it becomes darker and darker and darker. I also want to mention this detail, that as a Quranist, I thought that because other scriptures rely on, or other Qurans rely on the hadiths, and you can see that by reading their footnotes. They always add footnotes at the end of every page related to the hadith that's sort of connected to that Quranic verse. Because that's how it works, I thought, you know what, I need to buy Quran that doesn't have footnotes. That would mean that Quran is correct and the other Qurans are not. But then I realized, after everything I've mentioned already and other reasons, that footnotes or no footnotes, it's still the same thing. It's a lie, and there's no evidence and for the Quran being the word of God, and that removing the footnotes doesn't remove the violent verses. They're still there. They're not even sugar-coated. They're still there, written in a more modern format. It's still against Christ's teachings. It's still against the crucifixion. Still violent, promotes abuse, demonic. It scares you, guilt trips you, all of that. It's still there. It doesn't matter, footnotes or not. So no matter what book you use, it's the same message. And you realize that. Trust me, I ordered the book without the footnotes. I ordered the clean Quran, and I looked at it objectively and I saw that it was the same thing. Also that, this misconception that the Quran, it was different from the hadiths. It's not. It walks hand in hand with it. It doesn't go as much into detail, but it does tell you to do the things that Hadith explain in more detail. It really does. I didn't know this because I didn't read the Quran objectively. I looked at it assuming that the verses about violence was something historical, and also that every time a word fight was mentioned, I looked at it as, oh, they don't mean actual fight with violence. No. They mean striving. They mean never giving up, being persistent, and you know how the message you learn through these Rocky movies, for instance, that is how you interpreted the verse fight. Without taking into account that after the word fight was mentioned, there was always something about killing. And it had nothing to do with some kind of spiritual fighting spirit. It was about actually fighting. I think I found like 30, 40 sentences about fighting. And I printed them and I made a poster about them, and I was like, this is going to be motivational. I'm going to look at this poster every day and it's going to inspire me to struggle and never give up. And you could see in every sentence, like, there were parts of it that mentioned actual killing and things that, we're so, Muslims, you're so delusional. You really are. I know, because I was so incredibly delusional. I'm sorry for the length of this video, guys. It's gonna become 40 minutes or something like that. Okay, and also did I mention the very important detail that nobody was there when Muhammad had the Quran revealed to him? That for all we know, he could have made it up just for something to be used in his convenience. It could also have been true revelation, but it certainly was not from God. It was probably from some satanic, demonic entity, if not from Satan himself. Why else would he want to bash the authority of Christ in the Quran? Why would he want to put Christ on the same level as everything else? And make him some form of messenger, unnecessary, pointless messenger of God that only existed to tell people that, look, everyone, here is the book. And the book is what you're supposed to follow. Goodbye, I did my job. That is what they think his job was. That's why he died, right? That's why they wanted to kill him. Because he told them what they wanted to hear. No! It doesn't make sense. Obviously, they got angry with Jesus and they wanted to kill him and they crucified him because he pissed them off. He must have said something that pissed them off. I'm sorry, I'm just so frustrated with Islam. Just the way that he, Muhammad was illiterate. He couldn't read, he couldn't write. And after the angel revealed himself to him, all of a sudden he could start writing things and reading things. And that's something that is very typical for demonic hauntings. It's something very common that when a demon visits you, you tend to learn another language you've never spoken, you tend to be able to do something you've never been able to do. Kind of fits that description, doesn't it? Also, that Islam is so much against women. It likes to take the whole notion of being a woman and just, force it into like mashed potatoes. It doesn't want it to exist. It's gone. Women have to be like men, or they have to kind of totally strip themselves of what it means to be a woman. And then they are loved by God. That doesn't make any sense. Why would God create a woman and not love what it means to, love the actual woman for what she is? Makes no sense. And again, if you look in the Bible and you look at the teachings, you see that Satan hates women, particularly women, after Eve, the incident with Eve, and the fall of man. I hope I'm finished soon so that I don't bore you guys. Oh, and of course the most important one, you're afraid of questioning Islam. You're afraid that if you are to question it, you're going to hell. Because that's what you are taught. Every time you start entering debates and discussions about Islam, other Muslims, they kind of walk around the house and they spread this smoke to remove evil spirits because they think that you are questioning Islam because you've been possessed by demons. Sounds to me that they're spreading evil when you are approached by Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit. It sounds like they're trying to scare away the Holy Spirit. I don't know, something like that, but it's definitely not getting rid of evil entities. And the whole notion that, or that I realized, of course, that Christianity is the very opposite of Islam. The Bible, the way it's taught, things that's being taught, the concept of God, concept of love, of Jesus, of the whole message and purpose of mankind, and of God is just totally different from Islam. So how can they be of the same God? How can God have made such a big difference in his two different scriptures? Why would he teach two different messages if it's all one and the same message? Makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, I already mentioned that prayers didn't make any sense. Also, that many historical events mentioned in Islam doesn't match up with how it's mentioned in the Bible. I think I have covered very important things here. I think that should be enough for now. Sorry for just how long this video was. It's very hard to make these things short, but I'm going to hopefully get better at this over time, unless you guys enjoy this. You let me know in the comment what you want for the other videos. Thank you for watching, and God, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, these Muslims, I know what it's like. I know because I was them. I was just like that, and now when I see the lie, I see what a joke it is. The entire faith, it's a joke. And it's a shame that you cannot say that without being worried that you're going to get killed. Alright, thank you God. Thank you God. Of course, thank you God. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos.